Good afternoon. We begin this broadcast with an update on US-Canada trade relations. American President Donald Trump announced on Wednesday that the two neighbors have tentatively reached a trade deal. Following a very good conversation with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, President Trump stated that the two parties reached a very fair trade deal for both, which will prove beneficial for one of the world's largest bilateral trading relationships.
Yeah, we had a very good conversation with the Prime Minister last night, and we've come to a deal with Canada. As you know, the 50% tariffs across the board were going on against Canada today, and they called yesterday and they gave us the points that we had to have. Very fair deal for both. The tariffs will be non-existent for our farmers. Our farmers were paying tremendous tariffs into Canada, and those tariffs are going to be totally eviscerated, down to zero. We're doing certain things. Got to give something, and we're doing certain things. They were paying a high number. We're reducing it a little bit. It's good for everybody. But our farmers are going to be thrilled. Our manufacturers are going to be thrilled. And basically, we have no tariffs going into Canada anymore. Canada was charging us tremendous tariffs. We no longer have any tariffs. And what I was able to do is we put, as you know, under the new tariff, I guess you'd call it the new tariff schedules that we came out with. They were going to get a 50% tariff on everything starting today, and we've held it back 3 days. It's still subject to finalization of documents. So subject to the finalization of documents, we have a deal with Canada, and I think it's a very good deal for both parties. It's great for our farmers. Our farmers will no longer be held up because they were being hurt very badly by Canada.
The US leader also confirmed yesterday his plans to meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un later this year, following President Trump's remarks on Monday that Kim had responded to his request for talks. Washington is working to re-establish the strong relationship with Pyongyang, first built during President Trump's first term in office. However, despite the White House announcing a scale-back of joint US-South Korean military drills this week, North Korean state media released a statement from Kim Yo-jong, the leader's younger sister, yesterday. Therein she noted that while relations between the two leaders remain excellent, America's hostile policies toward the Democratic People's Republic of Korea have not changed.
Can't tell you that. But I get along with him. And you know what? The fact that I get along with him, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. He has 57 very powerful nuclear weapons. Should have never allowed it to happen. They should have never allowed it. If I were president, I wouldn't have allowed it. But he's got them. I get along with him very well. You can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon. And I know Kim Jong-un very well, and he's going to be fine. As long as we have a smart president, he's going to be fine. If we have a dumb president, then he's probably not going to be so fine.
As the US continues its campaign against the International Criminal Court, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has announced that the Trump administration is sanctioning ICC President Tomoko Akane and senior trial lawyer Abdoulaye Seye, while EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says she stands firmly with the ICC and its president. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu commended Secretary Rubio for leading US efforts against what he called the ICC's illegitimate overreach, and for making clear that the corrupt officials who lead the ICC will face consequences. And in a dramatic U-turn, the Spanish government has announced that 500 migrant girls will be transferred from Ceuta to mainland Spain, despite vehemently denying that Schengen had been broken following the mass arrival of approximately 70,000 African migrants into the Spanish enclave in late July. Pedro Sanchez's government is now willingly allowing these migrants to enter the European Union. It comes a mere week after Spanish Interior Minister Fernando Grande Marlaska stated that anyone who illegally enters Ceuta will not reach the peninsula nor the European continent. The decision, however, comes amid emerging police reports of a growing number of sexual assaults committed by migrants against migrant girls and women in Ceuta.
So, Ceuta, the Spanish enclave in northern Morocco on the Moroccan coast, as you're well aware, a couple of weeks ago was effectively invaded by, depending on the reports you read, anything from 50 to 70,000 migrants, both from Morocco and other parts of North Africa, who swarmed the borders, swam around the seaport onto the beaches, etc., etc. And then a large majority of them were sent back to Morocco, but thousands have remained. And there are reports coming out of harassment of women, of grabbing of women, of sexual assault of women, rapes of women, people being dragged up into the hills and horrific things done to them, specifically by these migrants. So this says Spain's own national police union, which is called JUPOL or UPOL, has put out an emergency warning to get young girls off of the streets of Ceuta. Girls are being grabbed by migrant gangs and dragged into the mountains to be gang raped, and the media aren't reporting this. It's the police themselves that are reporting it. So I read that and I thought, that sounds quite sensationalist. Is that true? How can I verify that? So then take a look at this next slide. So I asked the question, can this be verified from Spanish media or from police sources? Yes. UPOL spokesperson Laura Garcia, so actually names the person that said it, has stated that groups of girls and women near Ceuta's CETI stay close by police vans because separating means that they are raped or sexually assaulted. Police sources describe assaults in nearby mountain areas around it where victims are taken and hidden. Spanish outlets including El Español, COPE, El Mundo and Okidario report 10 to 15 complaints, mostly migrant victims and perpetrators, with judicial confirmation of several cases. So it's actually migrant women that this is being done to, but that's not necessarily an excuse, and there are other local Spanish women that live there. Now that says 10 to 15 cases. I've seen another report which specifically details that there have been 19 cases so far. So when you try and draw that comparison, when you say that these men pose a direct threat to women and girls, as I say, you get accused of all sorts of things. You get accused of racism and stereotyping and being bigoted, etc., etc. But we have a live example. These men have only been in Ceuta for a couple of weeks, and already you've got, depending on which report you read, 10, 15 or 19 cases of serious sexual assaults and rapes carried out by these migrant men.
The UK, while no longer a member of the EU, is dealing with its own migrant crisis. As illegal migrants continue to cross the English Channel onto British shores, Prime Minister Andy Burnham's government released on Wednesday a guide to help these so-called asylum seekers assimilate into British society. The booklet, called Understanding Behaviours and Expectations in the UK, a guide for asylum seekers, explains that women have equal rights to work, study, travel, and make their own decisions in the UK without requiring permission from a male. Additionally, this misuse of UK tax money explains to these migrants that rape, pedophilia, and physical abuse are crimes in Britain. One online commentator questioned that if you have to explain that they can't rape women and that sex with children is illegal, why would you let them into your country in the first place?
I genuinely cannot believe what I have just read. The government has just published a handy guide for illegal migrants on how not to be a rapist, not to be a paedophile, how not to beat women, and how not to leave babies alone. That, again, may be really hard to believe, but that is exactly what they have just done. Illegal migrants are being taught what consent means, being taught that a woman has to say yes before you get to have sex with them. It has to be explained to them that men and women are equal. There's a handy cartoon here to help them understand that beating a woman is illegal. They're also told that it is illegal to harass people. And they have a full explainer here as to what child abuse is, including any sexual contact with a child under 16 is a serious crime. And it goes on and on and on. There's some important rules for parents, informing them that they shouldn't leave babies alone. Now, there's endless propaganda from the government that actually these men, that 200,000 people have turned up on our beaches illegally over the last 8 years from countries like Afghanistan. don't pose any meaningful threat to British women and girls. We know that that is not true. And when Nigel Farage and other reform figures have pointed out the threat that they pose to British women and girls, they are howled and shouted at by the political establishment. Well, this disgrace shows you exactly what the government knows. They know that they are a menace, and they are living in taxpayer-funded hotels. You are paying for their living costs in HMOs, in hotels. They are being dispersed all around the country, and they are in your local area. In some cases, they're near schools.
Stay connected to our Love World Network channels as we continue to bring you the latest. And now moving on to more international developments. In the latest updates on the Middle East, President Trump has expressed America's readiness to impose even greater sanctions on Iran. Speaking from the White House on Wednesday, the president further noted that Washington is willing to continue its naval blockade on Iranian ports and vessels in the Hormuz Strait if a deal isn't reached.
I want to ask you about Canada, but first, the Treasury Secretary says that we could see the most impactful sanctions on Iran this week. When will they come, and what else could be sanctioned on Iran?
Well, we have things that we could sanction. We have very draconian sanctions, and we'll see what happens. Right now, the strait is open. A lot of boats are coming through. People aren't reporting that, and that may slow down a little bit at some point, but right now a lot of boats are coming through. The naval blockade has been extremely effective. Literally while it's up, and that's been for quite a while, except for a couple of little pauses where we opened it purposely with a deal, but the deal didn't terminate, the deal didn't turn out to be what they said, when they tell us one thing and they do another. But the blockade has been 100% successful. No boats have gotten into Iran, but they are getting in for other places. But we'll see. We're going to see what happens. It'll either be extremely good and oil prices are going to drop like a rock, or we'll continue to do exactly what we're doing. They were talking about $350 a barrel, and it's today $84, $85. And we are getting a lot of oil out. But the other thing that's happened is people have found other alternatives, which they never thought about. Texas, Alaska, Louisiana, and other places. In addition, a lot of pipelines, record numbers of pipelines are being built. So I think the Hormuz Strait's not going to be quite as important as it was in the past.
As the US continues mounting economic pressure on the Iranian regime, Israel has announced its own plans to destabilize the country's leadership and enable change. In a warning to the regime and the Revolutionary Guard Corps, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called on the Iranians to give up their weapons and surrender or face death.
וביחס למה שנעשה בהמשך באיראן, יש לנו תוכנית סדורה עם הרבה הפתעות. לערער את המשטר, לאפשר שינוי. יש לנו עוד הרבה מטרות, ולא אפרט אותן כאן. אבל לפעילי משמרות המהפכה, אלה שרודים בעם האיראני ברחובות, אומר לכם רק זאת. גם אתם על הכוונת. מי שיניח את נשקו, לא יאונה לו כל רע. מי שלא יעשה זאת, דמו בראשו. ולעם האיראני אני אומר, אני מדבר איתכם ועבורכם כבר עשרות שנים. רגע האמת מתקרב, כי איננו מבקשים לחלק את איראן. אנחנו מבקשים לשחרר את איראן, לשחרר אותה מעול העריצות ולחיות עימה בשלום. אבל בסופו של יום, השחרור מעול העריצות, השחרור הזה יהיה תלוי בכם, בני העם האיראני האמיץ ולמוד הסבל. אני מאמין שאם תתייצבו ברגע האמת, לא ירחק היום שבו ישראל ואיראן תחזורנה להיות ידידות אמיצות.
We'll be back shortly after the break. Stay tuned for more international developments.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, get ready for a night full of wonder. The lights are up, the stage is set,
In another Middle East development, the Iran-backed Houthis claim to have imposed 3 new strategies against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia amid their long-standing dispute. These consist of a blockade for blockade targeting Saudi shipping in the Red Sea, strikes on Saudi military mobilizations wherever they occur, and measures to prevent Saudi incursions into Yemeni airspace. The moves form part of a broader escalation that follows Saudi Arabia's military intervention in Yemen in 2015, launched in support of the internationally recognized government, and a series of recent flare-ups that have strained the relative calm maintained since a 2022 truce.
وفرضنا على هذا العدو المجرم 3 معادلات رئيسية اليوم، وهذه من نعمة الله علينا أن أصبح الشعب اليمني اليوم وقواته المسلحة في هذه القوة التي مكنها الله منها أن تفرض على الأعداء المعادلات. يعني عندما كان الأعداء هم من يقتلونا وهم من يدمرون شعبنا وهم من يفعلون بنا كل شيء في المراحل الماضية منذ عام 2015 وإلى اليوم، واليوم نفرض عليهم المعادلات، وواجهنا الأمريكي والإسرائيلي وانتصرنا عليهم بفضل الله. اليوم فرضنا عليهم 3 معادلات. المعادلة الأولى الحصار بالحصار، مقابل الحصار الذي يفرضه علينا العدو السعودي فرضنا عليه حصارا في البحر الأحمر، وبفضل الله أنه أصبح حصارا محكما لا يستطيع السعودي تمرير سفينة واحدة، وهذا من فضل الله علينا. والنقطة الثانية أو المعادلة الثانية التي فرضتها قواتنا المسلحة اليوم معادلة ضرب التحشيدات السعودية أينما كانت، ونحن نشاهد بفضل الله وبركة الله هذه الضربات. المعادلة الثالثة أصبحنا اليوم نحمي سيادة اليمن ونحمي أجواء اليمن من أي اختراق سعودي لبلدنا، وأصبحنا بفضل الله أمام أي اختراق نضرب الأعداء بضربات منكلة.
The dismissal of former Ukrainian Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov has become a thorn in the side of President Volodymyr Zelensky. Not only did his dismissal spark nationwide protests calling for his reinstatement, but now the former minister has spoken out against Zelensky's illegitimate presidency. In a video address, Fedorov called on the Kiev government to restore elections, which were suspended under martial law amid the ongoing conflict with Russia. Calling out the state's unlawful actions, he noted that Ukraine can simultaneously wage war and remain a democracy.
Українці завжди давали своїй владі величезний кредит довіри, особливо під час війни. Мільйони людей погодилися на неймовірні обмеження, труднощі і жертви, тому що розуміли, країна повинна вистояти. І це величезна відповідальність для будь-якої влади. Бо кредит довіри – це не право робити все без пояснень. Це обов'язок бути ще чеснішим із суспільством. Саме тут має існувати простий принцип нового суспільного договору. Громадянин довіряє державі, держава говорить із громадянином чесно, громадянин виконує свій обов'язок, держава виконує свій. Людина захищає країну, країна захищає людину. Люди не вимагають, щоб держава ніколи не помилялася. Вони розуміють, наскільки складною є ця війна. Вони розуміють, що інколи немає ідеальних рішень, але вони мають право на правду. Саме так відновлюється довіра, а разом із довірою повертається надія. Надія, що після цієї війни Україна стане не просто країною, яка вижила, а країною, яка стала сильнішою, справедливішою і вільнішою. Ми не маємо права дозволити старій системі забрати в українців цю надію. Україна може одночасно воювати і залишатися демократією. Вибори – це не лише бюлетень, це момент, коли влада знову приходить до громадянина і говорить: ось ми це зробили, тепер ви вирішуєте, чи довіряєте нам далі. І саме цей принцип відрізняє демократичну державу від системи, де влада сама вирішує, коли суспільство може її оцінити.
And now let's take a recap of today's headlines. Trump administration sanctions International Criminal Court president and senior trial lawyer to protect American sovereignty. Spanish government announces transfer of 500 migrant girls from Ceuta to mainland Spain, breaking Schengen border.
For a couple of weeks, and already you've got, depending on which report you read, 10, 15 or 19 cases of serious sexual assaults and rapes carried out by these migrant men.
The UK's Home Office spends tax money on assimilation guide for illegal migrants.
The government has just published a handy guide for illegal migrants on how not to be a rapist, not to be a paedophile, how not to beat women, and how not to leave babies alone.
Former Ukrainian defense minister calls on Zelensky's government to restore elections.
Українці завжди давали своїй владі величезний кредит довіри, особливо під час війни. Мільйони людей погодилися на неймовірні обмеження, труднощі і жертви, тому що розуміли, країна
And that's a wrap for your midday news updates. From myself, Marika Schroeder, and the team right here in Cape Town. Thank you for tuning in to Allen 24 International. Until next time, goodbye.